She pictured herself a year ago, standing at the open screen door of this very house, back when it had been only a home, not a bed and breakfast. She remembered the feel of the white silk dress flowing down to her sandaled feet, her long, normally wild dark hair coiled in luxurious curls down her back. 2 bouquets of orchids, one larger than the other, lay at the ready on the kitchen table. The envelope had been white, legal-sized, with her name on the front, penned in Dylan's distinctive, bold script. She remembered how Jake's truck had kicked up dust like a patch of white fog as he drove away after delivering the missive. She hadn't needed to tear open the flap and read the single sheet of paper within to know there would be no wedding that day. "You didn't think your note ought to be supplemented by something as personal as a visit or a phone call?" He winced. "I was afraid you would talk me out of my decision. But you've got to admit, I did the right thing." She'd admit nothing of the kind, but she didn't argue with him. If he'd cared what she thought, he would have talked this over with her before leaving, not 1 year after. "I'm sorry you had to deal with the aftermath, telling the guests, canceling the minister and the caterer." Her sisters had handled those details for her, but she didn't want to give him the comfort of knowing that. Besides, the logistics of the wedding arrangements had been the least of her heartaches that day. Thinking back to that time brought back the old pain when all she wanted to feel was anger. Or indifference. Yes, indifference would have been better. She held out her arms, skimming the bubbles that frothed on the water's surface. It was easier when she wasn't looking at him. "What did you do with the ring?" She pulled her hands back under the water. "I sold it," she improvised. "Just like I sold the wedding dress. Advertised them both on Craigslist. I put the money into renovating the lodge." Dylan was silent for a moment. "Yeah. Jake tells me you're opening October 1st. That's exciting." Dylan cleared his throat. "He also said you started dating again." "A little. Just a few dates, none of which had been much fun, but Dylan didn't need to know that. She could only imagine the hookups he'd had during his year on the rodeo circuit." Dylan rubbed his chin. "So, who's the current favorite?" He wanted to talk about them like they were jelly bean flavors. Maybe that's what the women he'd dated had been like to him. "Not sure I can pick a favorite. Maybe Thad Springer." "Springer? You mean the detective?" 2 dates last June, followed by Cathleen politely rejecting the third. "Damn, Cathleen." He took a second to digest that before asking, "Anyone else I know?" This time she hesitated for a beat. "James Strongman?" If she'd surprised him with Thad, she shocked him with James. "You're kidding me, right?" She just raised her eyebrows. "Of all the men in Whitefish, why would you date my stepbrother?" "Why wouldn't I? Because you never got along with the man? Because you hate his father? Those are your issues, not mine." Actually, the one time she went out with James, she'd spent the entire dinner wishing she was home watching Netflix. "I'm not saying this out of jealousy, but you should stay away from that man. You can't trust him." "You mean if he asks me to marry him, he'd back out the day of the ceremony?" Dylan winced. "How many times are you going to throw that in my face?" She didn't bother answering. Apparently, it didn't even occur to him that he still owed her a face-to-face official apology. "For the record," he volunteered, "there's been no one in my life. No one. Since you." Ah. For a second her heart soared. Then her mind took over. "I have no interest in the sorry state of your love life. This conversation is pointless. Why don't you go back to wherever you came from?" "I can't. Jake gave me a lift, and now he's gone. He's got a flight out of Missoula in 3 hours en route to Australia." He finally decided to go? The past year had been difficult for Jake, too. Before Dylan's mother married Max, Jake had lived with Dylan's family on the Thunder Bar M. He and Dylan weren't just cousins, but best friends, too. "He's on a 6-week tour while he decides what to do with the rest of his life. Meanwhile, his house is being remodeled. New kitchen, bathrooms, and flooring. The works." Cathleen remembered running into Jake a few weeks ago at the paint chip display at Ace Hardware, contemplating the subtle difference in tone between tumbleweed and flax. "So you've basically stranded yourself here. That was pretty stupid."